Good morning, it's Joyful Hermit. I'm just waiting a little longer. Then I think I'm gonna try driving myself to the ER. I'm gonna go to one that's attached to a hospital, not the one that's real close, just to get this checked out because I had a little tiny bowl of cereal, but I really think it was the green tea with a little bit of protein drink that set off my gut again. So this nurse friend who's married to my cousin in Texas, who writes to me, she's convinced maybe I've got gallbladder or something, so I need to get it checked out. So that's what I'm gonna do. But first, while I'm waiting for the dogs to be more, I don't want them to have to be in their crates way before their usual crate nap time. So they're here, one's on the bed and one's on his bed on the floor. And I'm going to read a few more of these that I have been reading from way back about 35 years ago, and these extend even a little bit more. um, well, this one was a little bit different, and I don't even remember who the person was. But it was someone who I knew or observed or something, and then realized had things in him and it wasn't my ex. Anyway, I learned something from it. I have asked to be released from my own image prison of a man who I thought of as being so wonderful. I had needed the image, the icon. It is strange how in time, a few years, now the icon is being smashed. I am left not untouched. There is a misty sorrow when I see how our ways part. Seemingly big gulps of waves breaking farther and farther away from each other. The aspects of myself that are hideous are those that anger me about him. The need to retort, to be right, to have the last say in an authoritative finality. And that I learned back then, and it's so true that often when we start noticing things in another person that start to gripe us or are negative, it's because they're the things we don't like about ourselves, but we haven't recognized. So this other person can start mirroring, and we start noticing easier in another than we will in ourselves. So it's always a good check if we see things in another that gripe us. Look to ourselves, and we'll likely find that we have aspects of that very same thing that we find hideous in our own selves. Then we can pray, ask God to help us, ask our angel, ask the Holy Spirit, help us get rid of these things that don't belong in us, that aren't positives. There is much ego here. It is masked by quiet that can surreptitiously pass for humility. This can be in me too. I suppose one day my strained and sought after humility will become genuine humility. At that point where humility and charity become indiscernible to the self. And that's the link between humility and charity that I hadn't noticed either, but I do now. And over time, the more humbled we become, and God will do that for us too. Say, God, humble me. And you'll be started to be given situations that will humble you, or see things about yourself that will humble. So, and suffering will humble us. I've been humbled, and there's still more to go. There's always more humbling that we could enjoy. It's painful to be humbled, but we can enjoy it because it also increases our charity, oddly enough. Charity and humility are indiscernible to each other. They're very close to each other, but we don't notice it. And they seem not to be. Lord, life and growing in it can be so painful. The path to humility is humiliating, slippery with tears, a path in which the self grows smaller and fainter, the further into the final perspective point in which one disappears. What's beyond the perspective point on the line of the horizon? Just openness and acceptance, complete love by God and for God, open space, endless oxygen, much to breathe in and embrace of being embraced. It's sort of describing, I was describing death in a way. Dying to ourselves can be, in this world, can be similar to our dying when we do die, because we're freed. When we die to ourselves, to our egos and things, and our desires, our wants, our sense of who we are as being wonderful or whatever, or thinking, I don't know, just to ourselves or to the temporal world, when we die to it and it doesn't become as important as it has been, we are literally freed. And what remains for us out there is we become this little blip on the horizon, or nothingness even. We don't even see ourselves or think about ourselves anymore. What is there for us is God. Openness and acceptance, complete love by God and for God. We start loving God. And then open space, endless oxygen, just a freedom to even breathe easier in our bodies and not to even think about it. Last night, ESJ and I watched the biographical movie of C.S. Lewis, his later years, The Shadowlands. E.S. and J are initials for my children. They were young then. They sat on the floor and stuff. I sat up or laid on the sofas where I would always be lying down. I cried when he cried, when C.S. Lewis cried in this movie. I cried finally over the death of his wife. Such an emotionally awkward man. But I wondered. No, I stated that no man would ever weep for me. Stated it to myself. Then I thought of Jesus across the Shadowlands, and I realize he weeps for me now. I miss not being married. I miss not being loved by a man, by another a soulmate or someone with me in this life journey. But gradually, Jesus was letting me know, like when I realized that Jesus was weeping for me. Jesus was ongoing back then in little ways and in big ways, letting me know gradually and more obviously that he was my husband, that I was his spouse, and that I was going to be wed to him. And here is this that I've talked about in a recent video about love. My young son had many questions regarding our lives, our spirits, miracles, levitation, lessons in life. He asked, just what is the meaning of our lives? I prayed with him that God would tell me the answer. I awoke with God's words. Learn love to love. Learn to love to love. That must be the meaning of our lives, to love. And indeed it is. This charm. Oh dear. I didn't have my volume up. Sorry about that. Probably wasn't talking loudly enough either. This was a dream. I dreamed of my spiritual climb. There were 2 children, a boy, a girl, both aspects of myself. We carry with us both dual aspects, dual gender, dual of everything. And an adult was walking behind. God, Holy Spirit. We climbed silver open stairs. At or near the top, we were in a restaurant or concession area. Both children ate pizza, but tired of it. We walked back down, back to the temporal. Then the little boy complained that he wanted more. I was too tired to think of climbing again, and I didn't appreciate the whining child. We had been climbing with our guide, Jesus, up the ladder of spiritual growth, being fed spirit food on high, yet the return and wanting more. Could it be we're never satisfied? And in psychology, in the spiritual, um, male often signifies more of the active part of us, and female signifies more our inner spiritual or our inactive aspects. So the little boy wanted more. He was eating pizza. He wanted more. And the active part of us, the temporal of us, we're out there consuming the temporal world, gobbling it up in essence. And the female in this, the little girl wasn't really participating, wasn't expressing irritation or whining, or was more in a quietude, as happens in the dual natures of us. And these are just what psychologists Jung and different ones have used as examples of dual nature within us, the duality, and of the temporal and the spiritual always in us side by side, but the dominant part comes through, and the dominant is more into the temporal and aware of the temporal. And in our lives, it's coming to a balance, or as we grow in spirituality, to let this other nature come to the fore. The more spiritual come to the fore. So, but I was being reminded in this, having the spiritual climb, and then coming back down to the temporal world, and then understanding that it's hard for us to ever be satisfied. We're not really satisfied by the temporal. The pizza isn't going to do it. We're going to get tired of it. We're going to get tired of the temporal and life like that. We may not recognize it, that's what's bugging us and what's irritating us. We tire of our relationships. We tire of what we've purchased that we thought we needed or wanted. We tire of our houses and our possessions. We tired of ourselves, our temporal selves. Our bodies aren't what we want, or tired of pain. I'm tired of pain, and we're not satisfied until, and I hadn't come to it yet with this in my own spiritual life of understanding, until we come to the spiritual. God was trying to show me what was there, out there, where I could no longer see myself in the world, where I was in the spiritual. How good that was, how freeing it was, how it was God's love of me and my love for God. But we are always learning, and that was what I was learning in reading Flowers of St. Francis and the Sayings of Brother Giles. I must look to the fact that in mortifying my body, I can grow closer to God. It's not that I would go out of my way to cause myself pain, but it is true that the pain draws me nigh to God. Our sufferings, physical and mental, emotional, our spiritual sufferings, dark night of the spirit, dark night of the soul, causes us to yearn more and more for God. If we don't recognize what we're yearning for, always ask yourself, is it God at root that I'm yearning for? It's always God. Your answer will always be God. You'll think you're yearning for a person, or you're yearning for some temporal thing, but underneath it all, what we really yearn for is love of God and union with God, and that freedom of being with God that God gives us spiritually, a release and a fullness of understanding and satisfaction, deep inner sense of that. Now, this is where I was starting to think about what I called journeying to the other side of pain. I had a doctor back where I moved to the Midwest. In the Midwest, I didn't realize when I moved there, but was very rigid, and they had very, ignorant thoughts about opioids. And it was only bad, only bad. No matter if you had genuine pain. We couldn't Google Mayo Clinic and look up pain medications and how they so well explain that if you have genuine pain, you will never be high, you will never be addicted. If you stop having pain and you stay on the meds, you will become addicted. Or if you take the meds, the pain meds, so that you feel high, you like that feeling, or to help your emotional pain, you'll become addicted, and that will be bad. But people with genuine pain, the medication goes to work on the pain, and that's and it never takes away the pain totally either. If you have severe pain, that you have to be on opioids for the rest of your life, and there are certain conditions that are known. Arachnoiditis is sadly one of them, but I didn't have the diagnosis of arachnoiditis. I had all my medical records, intractable, permanent pain, permanently disabled, can sit no longer than 5 minutes, cannot stand in one place no longer than 5 minutes. Not that I couldn't, but I would end up with a terrible pain siege if I would turn my back the wrong way, or I do something that I didn't even recognize I had done. Then it's always the next day with arachnoiditis, you're hit with it, and terrible pain and debilitating and horrible pain sieges. I'd have these terrible spinal headaches, and I had gone to high school with this man, this doctor, and he had my records, and he still decided to deny me pain medication. He gave me some at first, and then he got it into his mind that I was an addict and that I didn't have pain. Part of that maybe was because I would put makeup on and try to look good for my children and other people, and I tried to mask my pain from my children, although in the pain sieges it was there. And everything I did, laying down places and not being able to go places, not being able to drive them if the pain was bad in town, always getting other people to drive them to their out-of-town sport events. But he got this smug look on his face, and all-knowing. No, I'm not giving you any. You're going to be addicted if you're not already. And he refused, and I started to cry because I knew what this was going to mean. And I said, you are harming my children by this. I won't be able to go to their sports activities. I can't sit in the bleachers. I can't stand to watch. I can't stand on concrete. I cried, and he even got more stubborn, more insistent, thinking, that I was addicted, that because I was crying and like, oh, she's begging for opioids. He didn't say that, but that was just the sense. And he had this funny little smile and sort of put his head back. And I told him, I said, you are going to someday regret this, because something someday is going to happen to one of your children, and you will regret that you did this to me, and are going to cause my children not having their mother be able to go watch them in their school activities and their sports. And he didn't relent at all. And I went home and prayed about it and thought, well, God wants something of me. And I'll just have to somehow get through. I didn't know how I would ever get through the horrible pain sieges. But I prayed, and then also when I did convert to Catholicism and understood they celebrate like all these things. They celebrate Ascension Thursday. It's a big day. Celebration. I love to celebrate things of God. So I wrote him an apology note and asked his forgiveness for my saying that to him. And but it's been 5 or 7 years ago, maybe 7. His only son, who was 28 at the time, killed himself. He had gotten into drugs, had gotten addicted or something, and into drugs and ended his life. And I thought back of that, what I had said to him, and I felt so terrible. I was thankful that I had asked his forgiveness and apologized for what I said, and I'm hoping he didn't remember what I'd said. But I felt it at the time. I felt he's in trouble for doing this to me, because God knew I had the pain and that I needed pain meds. And my surgeon and my GP in California knew. My GP knew me before the accident and knew my ex-husband. He was the one who delivered our 3rd child, and knew that I was not at all faking. In fact, that I was stuffing it in, trying not to show it, and trying to be a hero. So anyway, I was into this other side of pain and what it would be like. I have never attempted to journey to the other side of pain. What is the worst that could happen? And look to the many, many gains. It would be a good opportunity for me to practice the presence of God, to learn. And I have learned in other situations that when another places outlandish obstacles in my path and makes life seem ridiculously odd, when I am so choked with anger and tears alike, when another does not respect my spirit, then it is the thing to do to look for God's message. For there surely always is good in God's perspective, especially when I have prayed concerning a situation. And today the anger and tears have melted like the snow outside our house. So I started on this journey to the other side of pain. Last night I slept not at all. The pain was wounding in my left foot, palms, and left side. I recalled when I must have been 4 years old and was lying on the varnished oak floors in the upstairs hallway of my childhood home. It was about this time of year, and the late winter sun streamed nakedly through the slatted Venetian blinds, casting stripes across the floor. I stretched my arms out wide, placed my feet one on top of the other. Arms stretched across the beam of light, fingers splayed, body taut, I tried to imagine what Jesus felt like on the cross. This was when I was about 4. And I think I must have seen a crucifix in our neighbor's house. My little neighbor girl would have me over, and they were Catholic. And because the Protestants don't have a corpus on the cross. They don't have Jesus on the cross, just a plain cross. But when I was 4, and it was before Easter time, I was trying to imagine what it was like to be Jesus on the cross and how it would hurt. And I would writhe on the floor and think about what it felt like for Jesus when he was dying and feeling all that pain. And then back to the present from these thoughts. Now, after having a luminous afternoon with a friend who brought me materials on mortification, I met a Catholic woman who brought me information explaining to me what mortification is. She also brought some holy water. I'd never seen holy water before. Include our shared blessings with holy water. I wonder if the Spirit was trying to reassure me last night with a bit of the stigmata. The night before was when I had that experience of the pain in my left foot and in both palms and in my side. And I'd had the stigmata explained to me by this Catholic person. And it's the wounds of Christ. His both hands, his feet, and in his side where he was wounded with the sword. And the nails were in his hands and his feet. And so I had this waking experience in bed the night before of feeling pain in those areas. And then the next day I had this flashback of my childhood and trying to experience what it felt like Christ on the cross. And then later that night I wondered back, was God giving me this experience, this waking vision? And I don't know, but anyway, those were my thoughts. I will always be humbled by knowledge of my sin. I accept responsibility, yet I am now cleansed, inner and outer. I have a respectful, healthy fear of what temptations may come to unseat my faith. The focus of my mortification is the glory of God and his suffering. The goal is to journey to the other side of my pain. What joy is found there? What mystery? My spirit is hopping as if from spike to spike on an electric fence, attempting to avoid the suffering. God said to me, a voice, "Suffer it, little one." And then I thought of this verse in Hebrews myself. In Hebrews 12, ye have not yet suffered unto blood. But God was trying to help me in that sense with pain that day that was terrible. This was another day that it just felt like I was on an electric fence. The sharp pains in my body. And then I heard this voice, God telling me, "Suffer it, little one." And it encouraged me, when you hear these things from your inner and you sense or know that it's the Holy Spirit or God or Jesus or an angel speaking to you from heaven, it affects and it helps. That's why I'm encouraging and sharing these things and how to be open to God in these ways. This was a vision I had, a vision one morning. I was laying in bed. I go to the figure waiting for me. It is Jesus on the cross. I go to him and cling to him. He sort of lifted me up to him, and I hung on to him. Placing my left ear and cheek into his bleeding side at his heart wound, I repeat to him tearfully, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." I remain there for some time. Look what I've done to you. I hurt him so by my sins. And I remember even now with the reminder of this, where I was, the kind of day it was. I had a flannel nightgown on and was looking to this side of the bed and had this vision of Christ there on this big, huge cross. And that's when I went to him and was lifted up, and then I clung to him and put my ear to his side, and I remember the blood trickling into my ear. The blood from his side trickled into my ear. And that's the first time I had anything like that with Christ. And it was monumental, really. and it was helpful to me. I was having a big suffering, and it was helping me get through it, to be there up on the cross with Christ. As I gave myself to to be Christ's bride in all ways, today I gave E, my eldest daughter, the ring I used to wear. From now on, I will consider my finger available to that mystical ring and wedding band God showered above my head, bathed in light. I had had a dream that God had placed two rings just right above my head. First, this wedding band ring, and above that was this smaller ring, like an engagement ring. And then above that, this light shone down like in a cone that came down over the rings and down over my shoulders. This brilliant light. And I knew that at some point God was going to marry me, that God was going to have me be his spouse. He had already told me in different ways that he was my husband. When I would grieve, wishing that I had a husband, a temporal husband, he would always remind me that your Maker is your husband. God is your husband. I am your husband. Me, Jesus, is your husband. And it would be so consoling. I would, yes, and of course, much better to have that, to have God as my husband. So, and that's that time watching that movie afterward. I knew that Jesus wept for me, that he was my spouse. So keep working with God. Keep working with God. He will lead you through. And at that point in time, I had started to go to a different Protestant church where they had more Bible study. They had college professors who taught Bible courses, who taught the adult Sunday school, and I wanted to learn more of the Bible in a deeper way than just discussing it. I like to have these Bible professors who would lend their insights and their knowledge to our Sunday school. So I'd had this, one night I woke up and this word mortification was printed in the black of my room. It was pitch black, no moon that night. And the word was printed in white, big white, all capital letters, mortification. And this was at the time that I had been denied pain meds and was trying to get to the other side of pain, to understand pain, to get through it to the other side where somehow I could mentally cope with it. And I didn't know what mortification meant. I needed more than what the dictionary said. So I called this assistant minister at this church. And he said he didn't really know mortification, but he said his wife was a nurse at this nearby convent. And she was a nurse in their infirmary. And he said that his wife really loved this Sister L. And he bet that she could help me and explain what mortification was. That kind of thing. I even told him what happened, how I had this happen in the night. He says it was beyond him. He didn't know. And I had been coming to blockades of the end point of what, from all the different Protestant churches I had tried, of any of them understanding or knowing what the kinds of things I experienced. So he drove me out there to introduce me to this sister. Sister Lucy was her name. And she talked with me that day and then said I could come back. And I went every 2 or 3 weeks and talked because I would have more questions. So Sister Lucy explained more of how we, in our imitation and following of Christ, may also be called to suffer. As his suffering saved the world, we can offer our suffering to God for him to use as he desires and sees fit. This suffering may be used by God to help atone for our own sins and those of others. Up until this time, I didn't have any understanding of vicarious suffering or of offering my suffering to God to be used, or that my suffering could be used in reparation for my sins or others' sins, or that my suffering could be used by God to help other people, or that sin was positive, that I could be called by God to suffer, that this was a calling. Except I was getting understandings of that without the reality. I knew that God had allowed me to have suffering and had removed me from my career due to suffering. And it's Mercy, calm down. Mercy, no barking. Mercy, no bark. No bark. Be good girl. Mercy. So, I was starting to learn about the value of suffering. And of course, I should know, and I should have thought of it because of the value of Christ's suffering and Christ's sacrifice on the cross. So this is what she had told me. And she also said suffering and offering my pain is a vocation, and a very special one, because it will involve a most selfless love on my part for others. I must offer my heart and love to God, and I do. So that was my introduction into that. Also to Sister Lucy, I had expressed concern of possible evil forces and traps as I draw nearer to God. She reminded me that Jesus is a very understanding Son, and if my heart is repentant, my many sins to interior temptations will be understood and forgiven. Even my temptations, God will help. God will help remove our temptations if we ask. And God understands we get temptations. And he forgives that. And she said, she told me not to worry, but to love and let God guide me and show me and teach me. So I also was finding out, because my parents had been brought up anti-Catholic. I had been brought up anti-Catholic. We'd been brought up generationally to fear, and that Catholics, they glorified suffering, and they were thinking you're going to hell. Very negative picture of Catholicism my parents had and I had been given. And I know my grandmother, both grandmothers, had been given that. My dad mentioned one time about his mother, and how she never let them play with any Catholic children because of the fear of, it wasn't a good thing. So this was very interesting for me to find out that there was much good and very loving and very peaceful and reassuring. So that's an aside, but just another thing that I learned.